Hi, welcome back to The Future is Female. This is your host, Ruffin. Today we have a super exciting episode featuring our first ever female investor, Ashley Aydin. She's a principal investor at VamosVentures, an early stage venture capital fund investing in diverse founders. In this episode, Ashley and I dive into her early career between the capital markets desk at Morgan Stanley and an e commerce YC startup, why she pursued her MBA at MIT Sloan, and who the MBA might not be right for. Plus, how her team at VamosVentures is working to get more money in the hands of diverse founders. I'm so excited to share her story, so let's get started. Hi, Ashley. Welcome to the Future is Female podcast. So excited to meet you. You're actually our first investor on the show. So excited that you're here. And if you could just start off by sharing a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got started investing.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here today, especially love all the work that you're doing with this podcast. So kudos to you. But yeah, I'm Ashley. I'm a principal at VamosVentures. We're an early stage fund, so basically pre-seed to Series A, focused on investing in diverse founding teams. We have a big bet on the Latinx, founding team and/or the end population, but diversity really matters to us. And I could get more into VamosVentures in a second, but in terms of my personal background, I am a proud New Yorker, born and bred. My mom's Puerto Rican, my dad's Turkish. My dad's an immigrant. He immigrated to this country at 22 with, the traditional immigrant story of nothing in his pocket and sort of followed the American dream. And so I grew up in Staten Island, New York. Very much was always a curious person. So I did journalism in high school. I was always asking a lot of questions, very academic, because my parents very much were like, they dropped out of college. And so they were like, focus on school. And if you do well in school, you could get a lot of places in life. So I did that. And so went to Brown University for undergrad. Very much there started to get more in tune with what entrepreneurship is and what investing is and whatnot, and participated in the Brown Entrepreneurship Program and Lady Launchers and all of these programs that, again, going back to the American dream, I was like, wait, I could do that too. And so after school, because I wanted a foundation in finance, joined a capital markets desk at Morgan Stanley, was covering public equities and sort of the stories behind them, management teams, what moved markets. And then after that, I was there for about 2 years. I said to myself, well, I was always so curious about this entrepreneurial journey, what happens at startups. So I made the leap. My parents still, say that I don't know if you should have made that, but hopefully it turned out okay. But anyway, I joined a YC, a Y Combinator e-commerce startup, and did everything there from sales to business development to strategy. The company was called Shoptiques.com, is called Shoptiques.com. And basically what Shoptiques.com is a digital storefront, if you will, for small and medium-sized boutiques. So, a lot of these companies, a lot of these smaller boutiques don't have the power or the staff to compete with the likes of Amazon, right? Or sell their product online. It's very hard. So that was Shoptiques' and that's Shoptiques' value proposition. And then after that, I did a few different strategy roles, digital strategy, consumer meets technology at corporate. So Saks Fifth Avenue, Estee Lauder, thinking about things like virtual beauty, buy online, pick up in store, all these cool technologies that meet the consumer where he or she's at. And so jumped into business school because after that I said, oh, well, it's a great marriage of all these different interesting things that I did. And it was venture capital. And, while I was in school, I worked for a few different funds, but very much started thinking to myself, well, and reading about these stats that are so staggering of the investment dollars going into, women and people of color. And I was like, what this needs to change. Being Puerto Rican, Turkish, first-gen college student, I wanted to see more people like me getting funded. And so I met Marcos Gonzalez, who's the founder and managing partner of VamosVentures, between my first and second year at MIT Sloan. And the fund had closed in May 2021, and I joined full time. And I said, let me make my life's work investing in these types of founders and changing the landscape by not only investing in founders, but also helping to diversify these capital allocator seats and folks that get the types of folks that get into venture. So that's sort of my background and how I got here. And I'm extremely passionate, if you can tell, about diversifying the space and building ecosystems that are supportive in such ways.
Amazing. Well, so much to dive into today. Very excited. I'm curious, before we talk a little bit more about Vamos, can you share a little bit more about your decision process to pursue the MBA? And was it really because you had decided you wanted to do venture capital like during school or after school? I personally get a ton of questions. I just did the UCLA Anderson MBA. I get so many questions around, is the MBA worth it? And would really love to hear more about your thought process there.
Absolutely. I often say, if you're wanting to found a company, it's not necessary, because I truly think that the best experience with founding a company is actually going out and doing something. But it was more of a case for me of like, I was kind of considering venture, wasn't really sure. I thought it was interesting. And so, very, candidly, it was a sort of a 2-year figuring out what I'm going to do next type of break. At the same time, I was like, well, in these 2 years, I can build a really, really strong network. And so, for folks that are thinking about business school, of course, do sort of the risk reward scenario analysis, if you will. But I think that you go to business school, one, if you're thinking about a career pivot, two, if you feel like you are not well-rounded, or that you are lacking a certain skill set and want to sort of round yourself out, or three, if you really want to build your network in a certain area. So, let's say you're interested in the healthcare space, right? Go to a really great healthcare MBA program and build out your network and get that deep functional expertise in those 2 years. But if you're building a company, you would have to, I would suggest that you're more in the weeds and not being, not spending so much time at school.
Yeah, great advice. Definitely 100% agree with that. I'd also love to talk a little bit about your past experience working at that YC startup, and curious how that has helped you in venture capital, and like, maybe how does that think about the investments you're making, and how do you work with the founders, bringing in your past experience?
Yeah, and by the way, I highly recommend, anyone who's interested in venture to work at a startup, because, you working at a startup, you can speak the language of early stage founders and, like, early stage company building. You can wear different, and you will wear different hats as you build and scale this company along with the early founding team. You're a marketing person one day, you're the HR person the next day, you're the salesperson, right? And so it's such a comprehensive experience. What I brought out of Shoptiques that I applied to sort of my investing career is how to build really solid company culture, and how to, almost create a machine of a sales process, right? We were on the phones every day calling these boutiques and pitching the value prop. And from that, I learned how you be succinct, how important storytelling is, and that, you got to catch them in the first 30 seconds, right, of that sales call. And then on the culture building side, it was more of, these teams are very, very small. There are a lot of opinions. You got to manage, those different personalities, and you got to make sure that everyone's feeling a sense of ownership as you go out and build and scale a company. So those are really the big takeaways. And, as it relates to my investing, I'm a big believer in asking founders questions around culture and how they're building team. And I'm also a big believer in the power of storytelling as you're going out to raise dollars, because you may well have a pre-product, pre-revenue company. But if there's a really great story behind it, you can sell an investor on it.
Would you ever consider going back to the startup world and being an operator again, or do you love investing?
If I went back to the startup world, I would be founding my own company. Listen, I am very much a builder. It's an interesting question, because I think I almost get the best of both worlds at VamosVentures. It's a fund one, and we're a new fund. And so, although we're doing a lot of investing, we're also doing a lot of firm building. And what that means is we're all working together to create the processes at the fund, to create, the thesis, to create visibility and marketing and brand. And that is the stuff that I absolutely love. So I think I do get the best of both worlds here.
Yeah, what I've started to learn recently is that, working in VC is almost like working at a startup in itself, which is so interesting. So would love to talk more now about VamosVentures. Tell us about, I guess it's fund one that you're investing out of, who's on the team, really anything you can share.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at Vamos Ventures, we're founded on a few different basic values and beliefs, and that you can marry value creation with positive change. So, we believe the most successful products make life more productive, secure, empowering. We believe that the possibility of innovation can come from anyone and anywhere, and this is where the power of diversity, lands. We believe that today, now, is the tipping point for tech entrepreneurship, and that expression by diverse founders. That, again, there's so much power in diversity and different lived and work experience, that, it's so impactful to company building. We're an impact fund, but we care about returns as well. And we're very much, I know there are different opinions on this. We don't believe that just because you're investing in impactful companies that you have to sacrifice returns, right? And so, what we mean by impact, by the way, is wealth creation, social mobility, community empowerment, and racial equity. And we could sort of, dig deeper into those different areas. But the types of companies that we're investing in more specifically, are early stage companies. So I mentioned pre-seed to Series A. We're doing 500K, between 500K to $2 million checks. And we're investing in four main buckets. So health and wellness, future of work, sustainability, and fintech. And as you can imagine, and hopefully it's obvious that a lot of those areas affect the communities that we focus on, which are underserved and overlooked communities. From a health and wellness perspective, for example, we're thinking about affordability and access. On the fintech side, we're thinking about empowerment and education. On the sustainability side, we're thinking about how do we make our world a better place, a cleaner supply chain, cleaner tech, et cetera. And then on the future of work side, how do we uplift workers and empower them and upskill them and make them feel like they can be entrepreneurs, themselves, right? And own their path, their career path.
Cool. Can you share some examples of companies you've invested in each of those buckets?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the fintech side, we've invested in a company called Sumo Wealth. What Sumo Wealth is doing is basically it's a financial wellness company with a mission to engage, educate, and empower the Latinx community. They have majority Latinas who, maybe are interested in investing and in saving, but they just don't know how to do it. And so they're really focused on creating cultural competency, or products that are around cultural competency or have cultural competency, in speaking to this younger Latina demographic. You'll see on a lot of their social media. It's really funny. It's really engaging. And those two founders are very, Marion and Beatrice are very, very experienced in media and engagement. And so their engagement numbers are through the roof. In health and wellness, we invested in a company called Miga Health. What Miga Health is doing is focus on heart health issues and preventing the next million of stroke cases, right, and heart conditions. And that founding team is also very, very impressive. Jared on the team is a dual MD MBA from Stanford, and is very sort of keen on the mission of making folks healthier by engagement with consumer technology and consumer tools and gamifying the experience. Heart issues are prevalent in diverse communities, right? You can say the same thing about diabetes and some other mental health conditions, right? And so, those are things that we think about. On the future of work side, we invested in sort of a company called Paladin, and what they're doing is basically creating technology to make sort of the legal process more fluid, more inclusive, where families and individuals who may not have access to a legal team, now there's sort of more access there, right? And then finally, on the sustainability front, we invested in a company called Form Energy that is very much trying to make the world, a more sustainable place with sustainable energy. So a lot of different companies, and those companies that I just mentioned span from pre-seed investments all the way up to Series Ds. And so, the 90% of VamosVentures' portfolio is early stage, but we do have a 10% allocation to later stage. And I mention that because, talking about the ecosystem building and that we're not just a fund, we're really community builders. The early stage entrepreneurs in our portfolio, it's such value add to them to have later stage founders who have raised multiple rounds of financing that they could say, wow, I could be like that one day. Or like, let me call this founder who's just raised a Series C and get her take on what it takes and how to pitch and what investors to go to, right? And so we are really trying to build a community and having it come full circle.
Yeah, I imagine that is very impactful for your early stage founders. To that
And
point,
very empowering too, because I mean, listen, as the stats say, and as the stats show, like not a lot of investment dollars are going into not only women, but like the Latinx population. And so to have these founders who identify as case studies and examples of like, no, you can do it. I just feel it's so empowering.
absolutely. To your point of investing at different stages, can you talk a little bit about what you and your team are looking for in founders and in companies, and then how does that change from pre-seed, seed, Series A, and then in the later rounds?
Yeah. I mean, we very much at the earliest stages. I think everyone's going to have a different perspective on my team, but for me at least, it's team, market, and product. Those are the three main things. On the team side, what I want to see is this founding team resilient? Do they have some sort of, in or specific knowledge about the space that they're building in? Do they have, again, lived experience, work experience? What brought them here? And how hungry are they? The last thing I will say is going back to my storytelling point, are they good storytellers and are they good salespeople? Because I often say when you're at a company or you're building a company, you're not just selling investors on the idea, you're selling employees, right? You're selling customers. And that's so important. On the product side, it's very much like, is this built in a different way? Like, what does the tech stack look like? What is the value add of this product? Is it user friendly? Like, how much have you tested and iterated the product with end users? And then finally, on the market, I often say VCs are notoriously bad at market sizing. And it's true because, sometimes you can't predict a market. I mean, look at Uber, right? Who would have thought that someone would get into a random person's car, right? But the company is very big, and here we are. And so on market, I think it's more of, from a venture scalability perspective, can this get big? I think that's the simple question. Can this get big? And would yourself use it? And if you're going to use it, I'm sure other people are going to use it, right? So those are the three main things. And then shifting gears a little bit to later stage investing, I think that's when you have obviously more numbers, more KPIs to go off of. So I would say, those three things are still very important: team, product, market, but it's more of, what are the financials? What's the traction here? What are some early KPIs that we're seeing that indicates that there's sort of a positive trend line and that this company is still growing and scaling in a cost effective way.
Amazing. You've hinted on this a little bit, but can you share more on how you and your team really support founders once your team invests in them?
Absolutely. So we're a work in progress on this front, but I'm proud to say that we've helped a lot of our founders on a few different fronts. So the first is fundraising, and what I mean by that is we have extensive networks with other and within the VC ecosystem and startup ecosystem. And so on the VC side of things, it's introducing our founders and other founders for that matter, doesn't have to be in our portfolio, to relevant investors that might invest in what the company's building or the area the company's building in. So that's one. The second is thought leadership, and that is that we have those four sectors that I mentioned, and each of us, although we're generalists first and foremost, we have those specialty areas. And so if you're a health and wellness company, talking very specifically about go to market, how to reach payers, how to reach providers, how to build and scale specifically in that market. And so we have deep functional expertise there. We also have partners, if you will, on our own cap table. TPG, as an example, very, very big health and wellness and sustainability investors. And so, we have access to them and our founders have access to them for thought leadership. And then finally, it's community. And what I mean by that is exactly what we talked about before, which is connectivity, connecting these diverse founders to other diverse founders in talking about and sharing what the founding journey is like, having a shoulder to cry on, building community within different geographic areas like New York, like LA, like Chicago, right? And making sure that they feel supported, not only by us as a fund and other investors, but by their founding community. And I didn't mention capital because I think that's an obvious one, and that's one that everyone pitches. But of course, our dollars, I think, are very impactful in that most of the founders that we take a look at, they might be passed up by traditional VCs. And so, that's why it's important to have funds like VamosVentures out there.
Absolutely. That brings me to another great question. So, even for the companies that you're maybe not investing in, you're passing on, are there any great resources for underrepresented founders or communities that you point people to?
Absolutely. So we're actually building a Notion library for founders that'll be launched sometime in early January, and I can share the link once it's launched.
Yes.
But that'll be everything from best practices with fundraising, best practices with hiring talent and diverse talent, ways to go about if you're an impact-oriented company, tracking impacts and KPIs, how to win your first customer. Things like that. Related to this, actually, a resource that we often promote to our founders and any community company is something called the Founder Library. I think it's currently being revamped, but anyway, you can go into the Founder Library, you can type in any topic that you are interested in. So let's say sales, and it pulls up a bunch of different resources that founders can just read and engage. And it's very community oriented too. So we're doing our own version of that. That's more specific to sort of the founders that we take a look at. But that will be launched in January, and then the Founder Library is already up and running. I think it's founderlibrary.com.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to link both of those. And then once you launch in January, please share, and I'll make sure to share across all my channels.
I'd love to.
Amazing. I'm also wondering, where are most of your founders located? And then how are you doing most of your sourcing?
Yeah, most of our so we're US based only right now. I think maybe for Fund 2, Fund 3, we might get into LATAM, but there's so much to do in the United States. Major hubs for us: the Bay Area, LA, New York, Chicago, Portland. Those are really important strategic areas for us. We want to do more in Austin and the larger Texas area. A lot of our founders, just given the focus that we have, are based there. And so we're building the communities there. But there's also a lot going on in the middle as well, right? And we got to do a better job there. I think as the team grows and scales and we have more, folks to be on the ground, you'll see VamosVentures hopefully everywhere across the United States.
Cool. And then are you guys raising fund 2 in the near future? And can you share anything about the fundraising process and, where do you even raise money from? And anything you can share about that.
Absolutely. It's interesting because we're also on the other side with this fundraising journey. We haven't kicked off fundraising yet. This fund's 50 million, as I mentioned. It's a Fund 1. For Fund 2, we want to at least double the fund size. This way we could double our impact, right? That's the big idea. And again, have more people to talk to and have more of an extension of the VamosVentures team and support system and true platform. So the timeline for that probably is sometime in 2023. The fundraising process is very interesting in the sense that, we have to sort of bring together all the work that we've done. We have to showcase the success of our founders, which, knock on wood, everyone's been super successful. And the stories are there, the empowerment's there, the impact KPIs are there. Like all the companies that we invest in are impactful from they promote diversity in the fintech space, that they improve the mental health crisis for children and young adults, that they again are making the world a cleaner and better place. And these are the most powerful stories as we go out to the fundraising on our own fundraising journey to highlight. I would say that this market environment is very interesting to fundraise in, to say the least, both on the VC side and on the founder side. You have a high inflationary environment, you have lots of market volatility, you have geopolitical instability. And these factors, right, are I think almost making the market sort of settle down a little bit, right, from the lofty funding environment that we were in, 12 months ago. And so what that means for VamosVentures is that now more than ever, we need LPs who are big champions of diverse emerging managers that see value in investing in diverse founding teams and diverse capital allocators, and that you can really outperform by having that differentiated view and opinion that there is value and there is extensive amounts of returns in sticking to a diversified strategy and taking a chance, right, on not the traditional large VCs, but on the smaller emerging managers that are specialized in these certain areas, right? For example, investing in diverse founders and the Latino population.
Amazing. You brought up obviously the market, which was something I was hoping to talk about. Can you just explain a little bit about, how the market has evolved since the beginning of COVID to now, and, how maybe that's affecting founders at different stages of businesses, as well as, any advice you can share for founders hoping to fundraise soon.
Yeah, I would just say short and sweet is hang in there. I mentioned, the inflationary environment, the market volatility, COVID you mentioned, and uncertainty around that. I think it's brought us down from that lofty funding environment and back to reality. I think there was a stat that I read somewhere that seed and series A valuations are currently down, 40, 50%, right? From where they were 12 months ago. With respect to founders, I think that in these harsher market environments, as it relates to sort of the founders that we focus on, I suspect that non-traditional founders are put under a microscope and scrutinized even more, right? Because the expectations are high. Because of this, whether you're a diverse founder or not, I suggest focusing on a few different things. So cash is king, conserve your cash, be frugal, setting and hitting realistic milestones. When you go out to fundraise, make sure that, lofty goals and big goals are really important. And we want to see sort of that big visionary, right, founder. But, what are you actually going to accomplish in 12 to 18 months with the cash that you have on hand and the cash that you're asking for? And then finally, listening to customers and iterating on the product. That's to say, always stay curious and always put the customer first. I think regardless of where we're going to be in Q1, Q2, if there's an increased downturn or things aren't going as expected, the companies that are focused on those three things are going to survive, and the market's going to reward, the businesses that are responsible and weed out the ones that aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit back to kind of your portfolio, can you share, maybe the most exciting investment you ever made, as well as a learning lesson that you've had from investing?
Oh gosh, it's so hard to pick the most exciting one. But I will say there is a company in our portfolio that I think all the teams like, ooh, we gotta, we can't wait to see them out there in the market. Zocalo Health. And what Zocalo Health is doing is basically they are creating a primary care model specifically focused on the Latino population. So, it's not just one person going through a health problem or health issue in the Latino culture, it's the entire family. And so how do you create that cultural competency in primary care where there's not a language barrier, where that that grandma's going to come and her mom's going to come to the doctor's appointment with you, right? Where in the community that you're in, there is access and there is presence and there is high engagement. So they're in the midst of launching and scaling in certain markets. And I want to say 12 months from now, I feel like they're going to have a really big footprint. And these are the founders to do it. Eric and Maritza came from Amazon Health. They have extensive experience in this space and they come from the community, right? And they know what they're talking about. And so I think that makes their mission all the more and what they're building all the more genuine. In terms of learnings, I would say being patient with portfolio companies, especially in this market. I mean, listen, VCs are in the business to, make money for LPs, support founders, and, make sure that the returns are there. And I think a lot of times it's very tricky in that we want the companies to perform. We want the companies to do well. We're supporting them as much as possible. But I think VCs need to think about and pull back and say, let the founders do their jobs because they are the ones that are in the trenches. And not to say, I've been guilty of this. I'm sure most VCs have been guilty of this, of trying to, maybe provide ideas or, be a little talkative and more talkative in meetings. But trust the founder and let them do their jobs. That's the simple advice that I have.
Amazing. And as we start to wrap up, just two more questions. One, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. Happy to connect on LinkedIn. It's Ashley Aydin. Also, my email address, ashley@vamosventures.com. I answer all my emails, so feel free to email me and we'll set up a time to chat.
Amazing. Well, make sure to include all of that. And then finally, can you share a female founder, investor, or leader who inspires you and a little bit about why?
Yeah, I have been saying this since I've known about her, but Sarah Blakely at Spanx is my absolute idol. I love that she is this boss. She's built a company that speaks to many women. And so she's a wonderful brand builder and salesperson. She's not ashamed to roll up her sleeves and be in the trenches still after all of her success. and she's so humble. I feel like a lot of people of that success are not humble, and she's so humble. And I'm like, what a wonderful example of a powerful, successful female entrepreneur to show everyone else, like, you can go door to door and sell a product and scale this as long as you believe in it and hustle. So Sarah Blakely, love you.
Amazing. I also love her too. She's incredible.
She's great.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was so nice to meet you and amazing learning more about your story and Vamos Ventures.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Future is Female podcast. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. See you next time.